Ugh, those pesky testers, they always find some edge case in your input field that will break the whole thing. So it's time to get rid of that. With the Xamarin Community Toolkit validation behaviors, you can just have that input validation very easily. If you do the example, you don't need to write any code, so that is very cool. We have different kinds for all your needs: email, URL, your own regular expressions. We have multi-behavior validation to chain multiple together. It's crazy. It's good. Come on, let's go check it out. Alright, so on the left here in Visual Studio for Mac, you can see a file new Xamarin.Forms application that is running on the right in the iOS simulator. So we're running on a Mac. On Windows, you will have the exact same experience. First, let's update the title right here. So I'm going to make this input validation sample S, and with hot reload, you will see it automatically pop up on your iOS simulator. Also works on a physical device, so that is very cool. As long as you just make changes in the XAML, you can see that show up automatically without having to restart the application. So that is really cool. So actually, I'm going to have to stop the application for a little bit because I didn't install the Xamarin Community Toolkit yet. So let me do that right now. Right click, manage NuGet packages, and I'm going to search for Xamarin.CommunityToolkit, and it should come up right away. Here we go. Latest version at the time of recording, 1.0.2. Add packages. I'm going to add them to all projects. Technically, for the thing that I'm going to show you now, you only need to add it to the shared project, but you know, it's just good to add them to all because you're probably going to use more in your project than just these behaviors. You're probably also going to use other views and things. So, you know, for that, you will need those platform NuGets as well. So you might just as well install them right now. So the packages are installed, and the third thing we need to do, I'm going to use this from XAML. Of course, this all also works from code. I'm going to have to add this namespace here at the top. So I'm going to say XML and S, and I'm going to name it XCT. This name can be anything. And here I'm going to let IntelliSense help me. I'm just going to search for Toolkit because we have one of those fancy URLs in here, so you don't have to import each namespace separately. So that is really, really cool. And now I can just remove all of these, and I'm going to do this with entries. So let's just do that entry, and in this entry I can say entry.behaviors. So that's the way this works. This is going to happen with behaviors, and here I can now say XCT. And you can see all the behaviors that I can use here. So this is much more than I'm going to show you right now, because I'm going to focus on the validation ones, which is this one. And the way these are built up basically is we have the text validation behavior. I think that is the one. Let me just show you that first, basically. And what we have here is this one takes a regular expression, so that is that unreadable pattern, but it's very powerful, that you can use to, you know, validate input. So you can do all these kind of regex things to you have all these testers online, and you can see you test for a URL or for a email address or for some custom pattern that you might have. So that is really, really cool, and you can just specify that pattern here. I don't have one from the top of my head. You have some options here as well, so you can make sure it's compiled. You can say it is in the ECMAScript format. You have a couple of other things here: ignore case, ignore pattern whitespace. So you have a couple of options. Check out the documentation for that to see what it all does. But this is basically our base validation that we based the rest on as well. So whenever we look at what we have more here, the validations, is we also have the email. So then we have this email regular expression already filled in for you, or for this URI one, we have the URI regex tested and everything for you, and it's filled in. So these make it easier for you to just use this validation behavior instead of finding those regular expressions yourself. You can just use these. So that is very cool. So let's just do the URI validation basically and say You can also say what the kind is, the URI kind. So you can say it's absolute or relative or one of both. Let's go with the absolute one right here. And I'm going to close this one. Actually, there's one other cool thing about all these validation behaviors, and that is you have an invalid style and a valid style. So you can say whenever it's invalid, you can apply a certain style to let the user know that, something is wrong. So let's implement this style. So we are going to go to our content page and our resources. I also have a video on how to specify your resources and styles and that kind of stuff. It should pop up in your screen right now. So if you need more information on that, go check that out. But I'm just going to say resource dictionary and create a style here. There we go. And I want to make a setter. Oh, I need to do a X key here, give it a name, invalid style. Yeah, let's make it that, invalid style. And target type is going to be a entry. I'm just going to use entries for now. And then I'm going to say setter property is text color. I'm just going to make the text color red, which is, usually sufficient whenever you want to show something invalid. So there we go. Whenever something is invalid, then the text should turn red. Now let's apply that here. Static resource invalid style. There we go. Of course, if you want to do something else, maybe you want to show some extra label with like the reason that it's invalid or something, you also have this is valid property here that you can bind to, and whenever that flips around, you can maybe show some other UI elements or not, to instruct the user what is actually wrong and how to maybe fix it. So that's another way around it as well, but I'm just going to use the style for now. So here we have this one. Actually, let's run the application and we should be able to do the rest with hot reload. I'm just going to change the XAML because that is so cool. You don't need to do any validation. Well, you should implement your own validation logic, of course, whenever you go beyond this, because there's probably ways to trick this maybe. So you always should validate your input in different stages of your application. But this is, your front line. This is your input validation on your UI elements. Let's give this a little margin of 20 so the entries look a little bit better. Oh, now the header goes to, oh, let's not do that. Let's do it on the entry then, and let's do it margin 20. There we go. That looks a little bit nicer. And this was the URI. So whenever I start typing here, not a URL, and I go out of it, you can see it turns red because this is not a valid URL. So if I go back here and I make this HTTPS, because we're not animals, we're not using HTTP anymore, and I do this .com and I go out of it, you see it stays black. So this is a valid URL. So the is valid will be true in this case. So that is cool. This just works out of the box URL. So if I copy and paste this one, what do we have more? Then I have for you a required string. So that one is cool too. Then we don't need the URI kind, but what the required string does, it has the required string, and we can say, okay, maybe you want to subscribe now. There we go, save that. It loses the value for the first, but we gain that second entry right here. So this is the second one, is the required string. And with this, the string requires to be subscribed now in this case. So what you can do with this is whenever you have maybe like a password field, you can have this required string validation to see if that matches the password that they entered the first time. So, the required string would then be the password that they're entering, because this is, again, a bindable property. So you can just bind to it. And you can compare these passwords without having to write any logic for that. So that is so cool. Or, maybe you want to, the thing that GitHub does whenever you want to make a destructive change to your repository, maybe you want to delete it or make it visible or invisible, it asks you to type your repository name. That is something that you can do with this as well. You you can say the required string is the repository name, and whenever they enter that, it is valid, and you can go ahead with your action. So if I do this and I just start typing not subscribed, then that's not valid because you should be subscribed, right? And if I go back in here and I remove this and I say subscribe now, I have to watch the lowercase thing probably. And now it's valid, right? Because I entered the required string. So without writing any logic, this is how to do it. I think you also have some flags here. You should check out the documentation on how this works exactly. But the flags, we have different flags for the different validation behaviors, but with those flags, you can influence a little bit how the validation behaves as well. So, you can validate on attaching whenever this behavior is attached to the entry, whenever it's unfocused, whenever it's focused or not. So you have a couple of things to influence how this validation actually works. If you can figure it out, please let me know. I will make a video dedicated to that. This is just meant to be a first introduction on how to do this. So let's have a look at another one. Whoops, outside of this entry, let's copy this one again and paste it. There we go. Save it, and it should show up here on the right. So what else do we have? Let's remove these puppies here and whoops, make this validation. So what else do we have? So the email, we've seen that, URI email, all the same thing. Text, we've seen that one. So I think the last very cool one, so you have the numeric as well, where you can only enter numbers. Or the characters, you can have some characters that you don't want to allow, or other characters that you do want to allow. So, it's all kind of the same thing. You'll figure it out how that works. But this one is really cool, the multi-validation behavior. So imagine that you have some kind of validation scenario where you want to have multiple of these. It should be the required string that you have entered, but it should also be a valid URL. So you want to combine these two. Then you still have to write logic, and that is not something we want. So we created for you the multi-validation behavior. And then inside of that multi-validation behavior, I have to change this one to, make it closing like this, format it a little bit nicely. And then inside of this, you can just specify the behaviors that you want to validate. So you can make this a chaining list. So I can just, copy this one. It has to be a valid URL and also the required string one. So because it also has to be, this required string. So I should make this HTTPS youtube.com/Gerald/. There we go. So now it is a valid URL, and it is this one. So if I go to, HTTPS Xamarin.com, Xamarin.com, also good. It's not valid, although it's a valid URL, right? So that's not the right one. So if I go back and make this HTTPS, stop with the auto-suggesting. Oh, I probably also need to get the casing right in here. So stop this, please. YouTube. Come on. YouTube.com/Gerald/. You can see that it's valid now. So it successfully went through these both validations. You can chain multiple together, and you have to correct them all so that it's valid. So you can just, again, without writing any code, make a multi-validation input validation thing right here, right now. That is very cool. You have additional properties on this multi-validation one because you can also get the errors out. So this again is a bindable property. I think this is a collection with errors. There's probably some other properties in here that can help you with that to pull those errors out. Because then on all of these behaviors that are in here, you can say, okay, how do I do this? I think it's then the XCT MultiValidationBehavior.error. See, so this is an attached property that you can then use. And this is just a string, so you can say should be a valid URL. So you can also, have error messages for each behavior that you have in here. And then with the errors here on the top level, you can pull that out and you can show that to the user as some kind of instruction to make the input valid. So that is a very powerful stuff right here. That is a quick overview of how to use the behaviors in the Xamarin Community Toolkit. If you want to know anything more about a specific one or you can't figure it out, please let me know in the comments. Or of course, if you are using it already in your project and you just want to tell us how much you love it, also please do that in the comments or on the GitHub repository so that the whole team can see it. So this video was starting to get too long, so I had to stop going through all these behaviors because it's just such good stuff. I just want to show them all to you, but I can't because you'll lose interest, and that's fine because, we have a short time span and probably no one will see this anyway, this outro. Who looks at the outro? Does anyone do that? Let me know in the comments if you see this outro. If you do, I might come up with some nice thing for you. Who knows? There might be a nice surprise. So thank you for watching again. I hope you found these behaviors, these validation behaviors very useful. I know I do. I'm going to use them in all of my projects. I hope you will too. Let me know if you can't figure out something for one of the behaviors. Of course, also check out the docs. Or if you think something is really wrong, please open a issue on aka.ms/xct that will bring you to the repository. Then there is only one thing left, and that is to ask you to like this video if you actually liked it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Consider joining as a member to support me a little bit while keeping this channel up and running. And of course, as always, stay tuned for the next one and keep coding.